Welcome back. Newly released video here out of Norway showing a dog being rescued by a helicopter crew. The dog got stuck after being washed away during a massive landslide. You can see here that rescuer putting a harness on the dog so the animal can be airlifted out of the zone there. You can see all of the destruction throughout that area there. Wednesday's slide was more than 2,000 feet wide and nearly 500 feet deep. Local police say 8 homes were swept into the sea, but luckily no one was hurt.
Yeah. I'm right with you. I'm sorry, it just took me by surprise there during this newscast.
Right.
I thought, is everything okay?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Out of the table that I was at right now, it's normally a little bit wobbly, and then I looked up at our studio lights and I felt it shaking. And remember, this was the same feeling we had 4th of July and July 5th of last year. It was the same kind of feeling when the entire room was shaking. So at this point, we obviously don't know much of the rest of the valley felt the same thing, but
an earthquake shook San Bernardino County a short time ago.
That's right. The 5.5 magnitude earthquake was centered near Ridgecrest.
KCAL9's Nicole Comstock is live tonight at Caltech in Pasadena. And Nicole, what are seismologists there saying tonight?
Well, we were actually in Hancock Park sitting inside of our live truck when this earthquake hit, Susie. We honestly didn't feel anything, but I know that a lot of people across LA County and San Bernardino counties are saying that they did feel this jolting them pretty strong. And seismologists are saying that this was in fact an aftershock from last July's Ridgecrest earthquakes that were felt all over the place. So take a look at the map here. This is the area that we're talking about. The magnitude of 5.5 earthquake was centered about 10 miles south of the Searles Valley near Ridgecrest, so the same place as last July's earthquakes. And that's basically in the middle of the desert on the way to Death Valley. Well, people who live in the Ridgecrest and Trona communities are still very much trying to recover from the damage to their homes and schools from last July's magnitude 6.4 and then the 7.1 that hit the following evening. Now, we were out there for about a week last year reporting on that, so I called a couple of the businesses that we spoke with at that time. A liquor store that said they did have some bottles move around this time, but thankfully nothing that fell off the shelves. And then another restaurant that reported no damage this time around. But people there are still certainly very nervous since they've been through this before. Here's seismologist Dr. Lucy Jones, and then a woman who lives there, not too far away from this earthquake in Trona.
Hi everybody, I'm Mike Poland, the scientist in charge at the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, and I'm coming to you from Yellowstone National Park for the June 1st, 2020 update. Yellowstone's open, so it was a good chance for us to come and do a little bit of field work, do a little bit of maintenance on some of our monitoring stations, but we were also fortunate enough to catch an eruption of Steamboat Geyser. Now, Steamboat just erupted on May 31st at about 6:23 in the morning. It erupts with a water phase that can be up to 300 or more feet high. That lasts for tens of minutes. And then after the water phase, you get a very vigorous steam phase, and that's what we're seeing right now. The steam phase might last actually for just a couple of days, and it's like a jet engine that gradually diminishes. The geyser goes quiet, then it starts bubbling again, and we'll go into a new eruptive cycle. So Steamboat's still as active as ever. It's been doing this for about 2 years now. So before we get to looking at the data over the past month, I wanted to show you a couple other neat things related to Steamboat. So follow me down the boardwalk and we'll have a look. So this is Cistern Spring. Now, what's really spectacular about Cistern is that it seems connected to Steamboat Geyser. And in the day or two following a steamboat eruption, Cistern will start to drain. It's actually started to drain already. And in another day or so, this is basically going to be a dry spring. And then over the ensuing days, it'll come back. So there's actually a deep connection here between Steamboat and Cistern, where the water that fills Cistern seems to somehow get sucked into the Steamboat system after eruptions. Pretty spectacular.
Tens of thousands of locusts have invaded India's northern and central states. The grasshoppers, now in a gregarious state, are swarming agricultural lands, making pests of themselves in large parts of Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan.
The problem with the locust group is that they eat up the leaves of crops standing in the agricultural fields. It also hurts animals subsequently.
That's if they eat the same leaves as the insects and have trouble digesting them. Some areas that have been attacked stretch 5 kilometres. One district says 60% of the area has been sprayed with pesticides. Locust swarms are not new in East Africa, the Middle East and South Asia, but climate scientists say erratic weather linked to climate change has created ideal conditions for the insects to surge in numbers not seen in a quarter of a century. Here in Kenya, the ability to keep numbers under control is being hampered by coronavirus restrictions.
When you want to load an aeroplane early in the morning, there is also the restrictions of timing and also locating the swarms because of the curfew.
Environmentalists are turning to natural means to fight the locusts, for example, using the leaves and bark of neem trees as a repellent.
They're historically known that they will not touch a neem tree. Also, they will be killed very quickly because they will stop eating, they'll stop mating, and with locusts, the main thing is stopping mating.
It's also effective because a rising number of insects are developing resistance to synthetic chemicals. But many nations are struggling in their battle against the locusts. According to the United Nations, millions of livelihoods and lives in the Horn of Africa are at risk because of invasions earlier this year. A similar scene now playing out in India too.
Farmers in Central and South Asia are in a battle to save their crops from swarms of ravenous locusts. Food for millions could be under threat. In Tajikistan's southern Kaltan region, Saeed Jafar Umarov says he's lost half of his vegetable fields. Tajik farmers say that this season's locust invasion is much larger than previous years. For many, insecticides are just too expensive. Farmers who can afford to spray say it's not effective and have called on the government for help. Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan are among several Central Asian nations struggling to cope with locust swarms. Kazakhstan said at least 150,000 hectares have been destroyed by the Moroccan locust, one of 10 destructive types found in Central Asia. But it is the desert locust that has wreaked the most havoc. The worst infestation in 2 decades has seen desert locusts ravage crops from East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula to Iran, Pakistan, and India.
It's been slowly building up and increasing for the past 2 years.
Keith Cressman is the senior locust forecasting officer for the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. He says heavy rains caused by a series of cyclones in the Indian Ocean since 2018 produced the perfect conditions for desert locusts to breed in an isolated area of Saudi Arabia.
And it was an area where nobody could get to. There is an 8,000-fold increase in the number of locusts. So during this whole continuum, during the last 24 months, basically, the weather hasn't stopped. I mean, it's been incredibly unusually favorable for the benefit of the locusts.
From the Arabian Peninsula, the desert locusts swarmed westward to Africa and eastward to Iran. The Iranian military offered to help battle the pests, which officials said devoured at least 200,000 hectares of fields and orchards by mid-May.
It's very critical now in Iran. I mean, this month, if they're able to do, very, very effective survey and control operations, of course, then that would reduce that migration, the scale of the migration to India and Pakistan later in the month and early next month.
In Pakistan, desperate farmers bang drums or pots to chase the locusts away. The invasion comes amid the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused global trade to plummet. That has sparked concerns that there could be food shortages in some parts of the world this coming winter.
टिड्डी दाल का दूसरी बार जो हमारे इलाके में हमला हुआ है, इससे तमाम फसलें, कपास, मूंगी वगैरह सब दरख्त वगैरह सब खत्म हो गए हैं, ठीक है, जो कि इसका निज़ाम ज़राअत के निज़ाम से हमारा जो सर्कल चल रहा है वो भी अब तबाह हो गया।
For the first time in more than 60 years, desert locusts have been breeding in Pakistan's Indus Valley and further north on the Punjab plain along the Indian border. In Pakistan's Balochistan and Sindh provinces, 80,000 hectares of crops have been damaged.
دغه داسې دی چونکې دا 1500 سکوير کیلومتره څخه زیاته علاقه ده نو په دې پسې دغه ماشینان دا یقینا نه رسیږي خو موږ پر سپاټ باندې چې دوی چیرې راځي موږ تر اوسه په مقابله ورسره لګیا یو.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is reportedly considering financial incentives to encourage people to catch locusts and sell them as chicken feed.
They're very high in protein for human consumption, and of course they're very good for small animal consumption like chickens and ducks and these things. The most important point of all of this is that it has to be non-treated locusts. You cannot capture, collect, and consume locusts that have been sprayed by pesticides. That's very, very dangerous. So any type of ideas like the Prime Minister's, they must be accompanied by public awareness.
Cressman says high rainfall this summer in Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, or heavy monsoons in Pakistan and India, could trigger a second wave of infestation.
The numbers of locusts that are present in a number of different countries and regions is very, very high. And so it's going to take time to get these numbers down. And again, much depends on the weather. What happens this summer will be absolutely critical in terms of the rainfall.
We have a situation in there where the two problems of COVID and flooding are converging and reinforcing the impact on the population. And then with the locusts, what we expect is to see a portion of the crops this year lost to the locust infestation, which will compound the food security and nutrition situation for many Somalis. Somalia's coping mechanisms are significantly less than those of the neighboring countries. Therefore, the impact of it is not simply humanitarian, but has the potential to reverse some of the political and security gains that the international community has invested in over the past decade.
suuqyadii waxaa xiray mataqaanaa biyaha fatahaada xirtay dad badan oo muruqmaal ahayna suuq ayay ka baxeen oo shaqo ma helayeen oo maxaa yeelay dhaqdhaqaaq ma jiro oo dhinaca ganacsiga ah badeecadiina waa qaaliyooday cirka isku sharartay aad u qaaliyooday dalagii beeraha kale waa go'ay wixii yaraay soo galeen waa qaaliyoobeen
maxaan ka soo qaxay bool orax baan ka soo qaxay biyaan ka soo baxay bool orax hadaan ka soo qaxay biyo ka soo qaxay magan alla magan rasuul ceel jaalabaan imid ceel jaal hadaan imid hay'adda walaalaha waa mahadsan yihiin biyay noo keentay waa mahadsan yihiin hadda midda joogta maxaan u baahanahay nin loo daryeelo oo noo gurmado oo noo gargaaro waxaan cunaan u baahanahay
unless we are able to rapidly scale up our response operations, unless we get adequate funding from our donors, we will not be able to respond to this need of the government, and that window is closing very, very rapidly.
Tropical storm Cristobal is picking up strength in the Gulf and will likely make landfall in the U.S. late Sunday. While it isn't expected to reach hurricane strength, there is concern for a busy season ahead. Jeff Baradelli has more.
As the nation tackles multiple emergencies, it appears likely we're about to confront another, a very busy hurricane season.
2020 is turning out to be a very tough year for the U.S. with the pandemic and also civil unrest. It's just the last thing we need is a hurricane barreling into a populated region.
Known as Hurricane Man, Josh Morgan hunts the planet's most ferocious storms.
It does seem like it is going to pick up soon.
Including recent monsters like Irma, Maria, and last summer's Hurricane Dorian. Dorian decimated the Abacos and Grand Bahama Island, tying the record for the strongest landfall in the Atlantic with whipping winds of 185 miles an hour.
I was inside a concrete building and the walls were just shaking from the force of the wind. And when the calm eye arrived and I stepped outside, all the trees were just sticks, cars thrown around the parking lot. I mean, it looked like what people usually think of as tornado damage. This thing was hardcore, and it was, it's burned into my memory.
Morgaman is an affirmed adrenaline junkie with 30 years and 49 chases under his belt. But he says these last few years have produced more than their typical share of adrenaline.
It does look like in recent years I've been in a whole lot more Category 5 and Category 4 storms.
A new study from NOAA concludes what most scientists already assumed. These more intense storms are not happening by chance. Warmer ocean temperatures are enabling hurricanes to reach even higher potentials. The study's lead author, Jim Cosin, is one of the most respected hurricane researchers in the world.
Warming the planet has a direct correlation with increasing the speed limit. Storms are just going to start hitting intensities that they hadn't hit before.
Over the past 4 decades, his team detected a significant increase in a storm's ability to make the jump from a run-of-the-mill hurricane to a major Category 3, 4, or 5, meaning hurricanes now have a 30% higher chance of reaching that major status than they did just decades ago. And as winds increase, the potential for damage increases exponentially.
And you think of, okay, 20 miles an hour, it's not that much. Oh, it is. The difference between a 130 mile an hour wind and a 150 mile an hour wind is enormous.
While the NOAA study doesn't rule out the influence of a natural contribution to this trend, Dr. Cosin says when taking into account all the evidence, it does point a finger towards human-caused climate change.
Do you think that humans have already started to warm the planet enough such that these hurricanes are becoming more intense?
The potential for human activities to be impacting tropical cyclones, in terms of everything that we know, almost all signs point towards yes.
And CBS News meteorologist and climate specialist Jeff joins me now. He's here with projections on that latest storm threat. But even before we get into Cristobal, I just have one question for you, Jeff, about that new science and the increasing intensity that they believe is associated with climate change. Obviously, we've seen really significant hurricanes recently. In addition to having them be more serious, are you finding that there are also more hurricanes, more incidences of hurricanes as a result, possibly correlated to human causes of climate change?
We don't think so. You know, it's really hard to to find a signal where we have an increase in storms. In fact, a lot of our computer models projecting into the future do not increase the number of storms. Some do, some actually decrease, some increase the number of storms. But generally speaking, there is no consensus on that. What there is consensus on is that as we continue to warm the planet, these storms will get a lot stronger. And as we talked about at the end of that story, you know, as you increase the winds just 10, 20, 30 miles an hour, your damage goes up exponentially. That's why it is so important.
Really interesting stuff there.
Mumbai is bracing itself for the first ever severe cyclone to hit the coast tomorrow. Cyclone Nisarga is expected to hit the coastal districts of Maharashtra and Gujarat by tomorrow afternoon or evening. A red alert has now been sounded in both the states. Right now it is 450 kilometers far from Mumbai over the Arabian Sea. The deep depression may likely turn into a severe cyclonic storm. It may intensify in the next 12 hours. In Mumbai's BKC, all 150 COVID patients at the MMRDA facility will be shifted to safer locations due to the cyclone, as the makeshift tents will now not be able to withstand the intensity of the cyclone here. Home Minister Amit Shah just yesterday spoke with Chief Ministers of Gujarat and Maharashtra and assured them that all central help in view of this impending cyclone will be given.
Structural engineers of the MMRDA tell us that these white tents have been made out of German technology, but they can withstand a maximum wind speed of 100 kilometers per hour. But if the warning comes true and the wind speed does reach around 125 kilometers per hour, then these tents might not be in a position to withstand such an intense speed. Even though the structural engineers are putting sandbags at various places so that the structure remains intact, the state government and MMRDA feels that they would not want to take any chances at this point of time. Hence, in an important development, it has been decided that all the patients who are being treated here will now be shifted to a safer place. With camera person Sachin Sawant, this is Pankaj Upadhyay in Mumbai, reporting for India Today.
Even as Mumbai was trying to wriggle out of the coronavirus pandemic,
the cyclone is set to hit Mumbai in a day. In fact, it is a deep depression in the Arabian Sea that has been forming for the last many hours. In fact, today it is when the meteorological department which has been studying the entire deep depression in the sea, is likely to tell us whether it will really become a cyclone or not. This deep depression in the Arabian Sea has been traveling at the speed of 4 kilometers per hour and is in the sea right now, but is likely, after it crosses Goa, is likely to turn towards the land. Where will it hit? Where will it go? That's something that the meteorological department is trying to study. So a lot of preparations have already been gone into by the BMC and the various coastal authorities. The fishermen who until now were fishing in deep sea have really come back to shore. There is little bit of shipping on this, fishing that has been, that can be still seen on the coastal areas where the water is not really rough. But as yet you can see most of the fishermen have come back, and there's no one in the deep sea at the moment who would really have to suffer any damage. If it comes through the paths, I'm going in.
I can hear it now.
Literally, there's a tornado right here.
Steve, as you were mentioning, Martin County experiencing widespread flooding today. Many roads simply impassable. Others had to be closed altogether. WPTV News Channel 5's Megan McRoberts is live now in Martin County with a look at the conditions right now. Megan?
Yeah, Kelly, we went most of the day without hardly a break in the rain, but finally things have started to die down, and that is helping some of this flood water start to recede. But as you see behind me on these roadways, there's still a lot of room for improvement. Flooded roads really caused some challenges for drivers, even seeped into homes and businesses.
Oh, am I going to get through this?
Taking her chances driving through flooded streets in Martin County, dozens of other drivers weren't so lucky to make it through. Martin County deputies responding to at least 30 cars that stalled or became stranded in the flooding. Some say they haven't seen in years.
One time back sometime in the 1980s.
In Port Salerno, cars were submerged in water.
I feel bad for people, especially the inexperienced drivers that just think, oh, it's probably not that deep. And then they get too far and they don't know what to do and they get scared.
The driver of this car had to be rescued by law enforcement and wait for a tow truck.
This is about as bad as it's been.
Homeowners like Brian Scott fought to keep flooding from their homes.
But you can see the marks on my house right there. You can see where it knocked over the trash can.
He blocked the road with his truck to keep cars from pushing waves toward his home. Dawn Hubbard dug a trench around her house to keep water out of her lanai.
Just had to build this right here, all the way kind of around the corner. So there's no gutters, but.
And a new homeowner in Stewart learning the hard way. His new house is prone to flooding. While Dixie Highway in Stewart looked more like a swimming pool, and drivers becoming stranded or barely making it through. County leaders say Martin County has seen 20 inches of rain since Memorial Day, and now the water table is at capacity. The county working to pump water where it can and keep a close eye on the threat of any more rainy weather. And a county spokeswoman confirmed for me that fire rescue here in Martin County and Martin County sheriff's officers were working very closely together throughout the day to make sure there were not any impacts to public safety response time.
Thank you. In Martin County, flooding caused significant damage and left plenty of drivers stranded. Many roadways were impassable after drenching rains flooded neighborhood streets. Martin County was among the areas hardest hit, and the headaches may not go away for days. WPTV's Derek Lowe has reaction from residents who haven't seen it this bad in years.
Car after car after car. We've seen several of them towed here in what drivers say is 4 to 5 feet deep water.
It's above my knee. Different spots are different. I scraped the bottom over there. It just varies. It's pretty deep though.
Courtney Wright lives in Jensen Beach, but it's here at the corner of US 1 and Sea Branch in Hobe Sound that the water is deep enough for her son to kayak through, an area where driver after driver stalled out trying to pass through.
A lot of the cars were already stalled out when I got here. There's a few that have moved to the side. I've seen like 2 stall out since I've been here.
She says despite seeing other cars getting towed, several more tried to make it across.
If there are cars coming and they're looking, I tell them, no, don't go, don't go.
The results were the same.
I missed 2 appointments and I got a soccer game at 6 o'clock. I made it all the way to that end right here and then got flooded. There were about 5-6 cars, they're all gone, but there were a lot of cars got flooded.
Wright says the community stepped up, drivers helping those who couldn't make it.
The community is helping each other. There are people giving each other rides back to their houses. The sheriffs are over there helping people in their big vehicle.
That's all right, we'll be okay. As long as everybody is healthy, we're all right.